Let me tell you something about men that a lot of women don't want to hear, but need to understand. Men don't fall deepest when you're begging, explaining, over-loving, or holding on for dear life. No, no, no. A man falls deepest for the woman who had the strength to step back and say, I know my worth, and I won't chase what's unsure about me. Let me break this down in a way that's real, because a lot of women don't understand this part about men. Men don't value what they never had to fight to keep. That's not cruelty, that's conditioning. From the time a man is young, he learns that effort is tied to reward. You work for what matters, you grind for what's important. But when something comes easy, when it requires no sacrifice, no adjustment, no growth, it quietly loses value, not because it isn't special, but because the man never had to prove anything to have it. When a woman gives too much too fast, when she stays available no matter how inconsistent he is, the man's mind starts to register comfort instead of commitment. He doesn't wake up one day and say, let me take her for granted. It happens slowly. He notices that no matter what he does, she's still there. Miss a call, she understands. Cancel plans, she forgives. Give half effort, she doubles hers. And what that teaches him subconsciously is that there's no consequence for minimal effort. Men don't rise to expectations they don't feel. If there's no risk of losing you, there's no urgency to secure you. And urgency is what creates attachment in a man. That pressure, the fear of losing something valuable, is what forces emotional investment. Without it, a man floats. He delays decisions. He stays undecided. He keeps one foot in and one foot out because nothing is pushing him to choose. See, when a man has to work to keep a woman, something changes inside him. He becomes alert. He pays attention. He shows up differently. Why? Because effort creates ownership, and ownership creates emotional depth. A man protects what he earns. He cherishes what costs him growth. But if he never had to adjust his habits, never had to rise above his comfort, never had to fear losing you, then he never fully steps into the role of valuing you. This is why begging never works. Explaining never works. Over-giving never works. You can't convince a man to value you with words when your actions are telling him you'll stay regardless of how he treats you. Men don't respond to lectures about worth. They respond to experiences that teach them worth. When a woman finally stops chasing and starts choosing herself, that's when the dynamic flips. Because now the man is forced to face a version of reality he's been avoiding. He realizes he didn't have to earn her, and that realization hits hard when she's no longer available. That's when he starts questioning his choices. That's when he understands that something meaningful slipped through his fingers without him even noticing the moment it happened. Men don't fall deepest during comfort. They fall deepest during realization. And realization only comes when something is no longer guaranteed. The woman who knows when to step back doesn't punish a man. She educates him. She teaches him that love without effort is temporary, and access without commitment is a privilege that can be removed. And that's why the woman who refuses to stay where she isn't fully valued becomes unforgettable. Not because she demanded more, but because she finally stopped accepting less. Let me tell you something most men will never admit out loud. A man often doesn't fully understand what he had until it's gone. Not because he didn't care, but because presence can blind him. When a woman is there every day, loving, patient, consistent, she becomes part of his environment. And anything that becomes part of your environment eventually fades into the background. It's not intentional. It's human nature. Familiarity softens urgency. While you're there, he assumes time is unlimited. He assumes chances will repeat. He assumes tomorrow looks like today. And because of that assumption, he postpones growth. He delays commitment. He tells himself he'll do better later, that he'll step up eventually. But eventually is a dangerous word because eventually has no deadline. A woman's absence, however, creates something powerful: clarity. Silence does what conversations never could. When she stops calling, stops checking, stops asking for reassurance, the noise disappears. And in that quiet, a man is forced to hear his own thoughts. He notices the empty spaces where her presence used to fill his life, the good morning messages that don't come, the encouragement that isn't there anymore, the emotional safety he took for granted. That's when the mind starts replaying memories, not the arguments, not the flaws, the moments he overlooked, the loyalty he assumed would never leave, the way she supported him when he was uncertain, insecure, or still becoming himself. Absence reframes value. What felt ordinary suddenly feels rare. Men don't process emotions the same way women do. Many men suppress feelings until something triggers them. Loss is that trigger. When a woman lets go, the emotional dam breaks slowly. Regret creeps in. Questions start forming. Why didn't I do more? Why did I think she'd always be there? Why does this feel heavier than I expected? And those questions sit with him late at night when distractions are gone and reality settles in. This is why a woman's departure changes a man more than her presence ever could. While she was there, he felt secure. When she's gone, he feels exposed. And exposure forces growth. It forces accountability. He can no longer blame timing, stress, or confusion. The truth becomes clear. He lost something valuable because he didn't protect it. And here's the part that's hard to accept. The woman didn't have to threaten. She didn't have to argue. She didn't have to beg for change. Her silence said everything. It communicated self-respect. It communicated boundaries. It communicated that love without reciprocity isn't love, it's sacrifice. And sacrifice without appreciation eventually turns into loss. Men fall deepest not when they are overwhelmed with attention, but when they are left with reflection. When the woman who once brought warmth into their lives chooses peace instead, the contrast is undeniable. He realizes she wasn't just filling time, she was adding value. And once a man understands that the absence he feels is directly tied to his own inaction, that realization stays with him. Because clarity gained through loss is never forgotten. Let me explain something that sounds simple but carries a whole lot of weight. Letting go is not weakness, it is power with discipline. Most people think strength looks like holding on, fighting, proving, enduring. Especially women. You're taught that love means staying, fixing, sacrificing, giving more when it hurts. But real strength isn't about how much pain you can tolerate. Real strength is knowing when continuing costs you your peace. A woman who lets go doesn't do it because she stopped caring. She does it because she finally started caring about herself. And that decision takes more courage than staying ever could. Staying is familiar. Staying is comfortable. Staying doesn't require transformation. Letting go means stepping into uncertainty with nothing but self-respect to guide you. That's not weakness, that's mastery over emotion. Men often mistake tolerance for loyalty. They assume that because a woman stays through confusion, inconsistency, or neglect, she will always stay. But what they don't realize is that every woman has a breaking point. Not an explosive one, a quiet one. A moment when something inside her shifts. She stops arguing, stops explaining, stops hoping. And that's the moment she becomes dangerous, not to him, but to the version of himself that depended on her silence. When a woman lets go with dignity, it disrupts a man's sense of control. He didn't expect it. He thought if she ever left, it would be emotional, loud, dramatic. But instead, she leaves calmly, peacefully. And that calm is unsettling because it shows she has reached clarity, not desperation. Men don't know how to fight calm certainty. Discipline is what separates emotional reaction from power. The woman who lets go resists the urge to text, to check, to explain herself one last time, not because she doesn't feel, but because she refuses to let feelings override self-respect. That level of restraint speaks louder than any emotional outburst ever could. Men feel that restraint deeply because it signals something final, not punishment, not manipulation. Finality. And finality forces a man to face the consequences of his actions without distraction. There's no argument to win, no apology to delay change, no reassurance to fall back on, just reality. This is where the shift happens. A man starts to realize that her presence was a privilege, not a guarantee. He recognizes that her love wasn't endless, it was intentional, and intention withdrawn feels like loss. That's when he understands she wasn't weak for staying as long as she did. She was strong enough to leave when she realized staying required her to abandon herself. Letting go also changes the way a man remembers a woman. She's no longer associated with need or dependency. She becomes associated with self-worth and standards. And men respect standards they couldn't rise to more than sacrifices they never earned. A woman who lets go rewrites the narrative. She's no longer the woman who waited. She's the woman who chose. And choice is powerful. Choice tells a man that love was offered freely and removed consciously. That kind of woman stays with a man's memory not because she demanded more, but because she refused to lose herself. And once a man sees a woman walk away whole, unbroken, and dignified, he understands something too late. She didn't need him to survive. She chose him when she didn't have to. And losing a choice hurts far more than losing someone who had no options. Let me tell you something about men that doesn't show up until it's already too late. Men don't feel the depth of their emotions in real time. Women feel while things are happening. Men feel after the fact. That's why consequences matter more to a man than conversations ever will. Feelings don't fully register until something is lost. While a woman is still present, a man operates on potential. He believes there's time. He believes he can fix it later. He believes she'll wait. Even when he knows he's slipping, even when he senses she's unhappy, he assumes her love will cover the gap between his effort and her expectations. And as long as there are no consequences, his emotions stay dormant. But the moment she leaves, the emotional switch flips. Not immediately, slowly. At first, there's relief. Freedom, silence. He tells himself it wasn't that serious. He distracts himself. He keeps moving. But consequences have a delayed effect on men. Reality doesn't rush in, it creeps. Then one day something small happens. He wants to share good news. There's no one to call. He has a bad day. No one asks how he's holding up. He reaches for comfort out of habit and remembers it's gone. That's when feelings show up. Not love as romance, but love as loss. Men fall hardest when consequences finally meet feelings. When the absence becomes permanent, the emotional weight sets in. He realizes the woman didn't just leave, she took stability, understanding, and emotional safety with her. And now he has to face life without the support he once took for granted. This is when regret is born. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind, the kind that sits in the chest and asks questions without answers. Why didn't I try harder? Why did I assume she'd stay? Why did I wait until it was gone to take it seriously? Those questions echo because there's no one left to soften them. A woman who leaves teaches a man accountability without saying a word. Her absence holds up a mirror he can't avoid. He can no longer blame stress, timing, or confusion. The truth becomes undeniable. His inaction had a cost, and cost is what gives emotions weight. This is why men don't fall deepest during the relationship. They fall deepest after it ends, because feelings without consequences feel optional. But feelings attached to loss feel permanent. That permanence reshapes how a man understands love. And here's the part that stays with him the longest. He remembers that she didn't leave during chaos. She left after clarity, after patience, after trying, which means the loss wasn't sudden, it was earned. And that realization hurts more than being abandoned ever could. When a man understands that the woman didn't walk away because she stopped loving him, but because he stopped choosing her, it changes how he sees relationships forever. Because now he knows that love doesn't disappear, it withdraws when it's neglected. Consequences teach men what words never can, and once feelings collide with consequences, the lesson is etched deep, not dramatic, not loud, just lasting. Let me tell you why silence messes with a man more than arguments ever could. When a woman argues, explains, cries, or pleads, a man still feels connected. There's emotion in the room. There's engagement. Even conflict tells him he still matters. As long as she's reacting, he knows he still has access to her energy. And access creates comfort even when the relationship is unstable. But peaceful silence, that's different. Silence isn't loud, but it's heavy. Silence removes feedback. It removes reassurance. It removes proof that he still has a place in her emotional world. And men struggle with that because men like certainty. Even bad certainty feels better than not knowing where you stand. When a woman stops arguing and starts detaching calmly, a man doesn't immediately understand what's happening. He thinks she's just cooling off. He assumes it will pass. He tells himself she'll reach out eventually because that's what she's always done. But what he doesn't realize is that silence isn't a pause, it's a decision. Peaceful silence forces a man to sit with himself. There's no distraction, no emotional back and forth, no chance to defend himself or explain his intentions. He's left alone with his thoughts, and that's where the discomfort starts. Because now he has to confront questions he's been avoiding. Did I do enough? Did I listen? Did I show up the way I should have? Men don't process emotional loss through words, they process it through absence. And silence creates the clearest absence of all. No reminders, no updates, no emotional availability, just distance. And distance gives perspective. At first, he may mistake her silence for indifference. But indifference doesn't feel this heavy. Indifference doesn't linger in the mind late at night. Silence does. Because silence suggests self-control. It suggests she didn't leave in chaos. She left after clarity. And clarity is intimidating. A woman who chooses peace over argument sends a message without speaking. She communicates that she values her emotional health more than being understood. That she's no longer willing to fight for attention, affection, or effort, and men feel that shift deeply because it removes their ability to negotiate. See, arguments give men something to push against. Silence gives them nothing. No leverage, no opening, no reassurance. And that lack of access triggers reflection. He starts replaying conversations, trying to find the moment things changed. He realizes it wasn't sudden, it was gradual. She didn't leave when things were bad. She left when she got tired of explaining why they were bad. Peaceful silence also changes how a man remembers a woman. She's no longer associated with emotional chaos or conflict. She becomes associated with calm, strength, and restraint is powerful. It tells him she wasn't controlled by emotion. She was guided by self-respect. Men fall deepest when they realize they can't provoke a reaction anymore, when she no longer responds to inconsistency with emotion, when her silence feels intentional, not wounded. That's when it hits him that he lost more than a relationship. He lost access to someone who once cared deeply, Silence also removes the illusion of importance. While she was reacting, he felt central to her emotional world. Now, her quiet suggests he's no longer the focus. And that realization stings, because men want to matter. They want to feel significant. And silence challenges that sense of significance. What makes peaceful silence unforgettable is that it isn't punishment. It isn't manipulation. It's acceptance. Acceptance that things are what they are. And acceptance ends negotiations. Once a man senses that a woman has accepted the loss and chosen peace, he understands there's no undo button. That's why silence stays with him. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was controlled. Not because it demanded attention, but because it withdrew it. And withdrawal of emotional access teaches a man more about value than any argument ever could. Peaceful silence doesn't shout. It doesn't explain, it simply moves on. And that quiet movement echoes long after the noise is gone. Let me tell you what really happens after a woman lets go and starts growing. That growth is what makes her unforgettable. Not the relationship, not the memories. The growth, because when a woman chooses herself, her energy changes. Her standards rise. Her peace becomes non-negotiable. And that version of her stays locked in a man's mind longer than any argument or apology ever could. When she starts focusing on herself, a man notices even from a distance. Not because she announces it, but because her absence feels different. She's not checking in. She's not lingering emotionally. She's not waiting for closure. And that's unsettling, because now he understands she didn't just leave the relationship. She left the version of herself that tolerated less. Men don't forget women who improve after leaving them. That's the part that stings the deepest. When a man sees that her life didn't fall apart without him, but actually became calmer, stronger, and more fulfilled, it forces a realization he can't escape. He wasn't her source, he was a choice. And choices can be withdrawn. Growth reframes the past. The man starts looking back and recognizing moments where she was already evolving while he stayed the same. He remembers how patient she was, how she tried to communicate, how she gave chances instead of ultimatums. And now he understands that her leaving wasn't impulsive, it was inevitable. A woman who grows after loss becomes the reference point. Every new connection he makes gets measured against her energy, and most fall short. Not because they're bad women, but because they aren't her. They don't carry the same calm, the same depth, the same emotional maturity that only comes from choosing self-respect over attachment. Men struggle with comparison, especially when the comparison is to someone they lost due to their own inaction. He remembers how safe he felt with her, how understood, how accepted, and now that safety is gone. And safety once lost is hard to replace. Growth also removes the fantasy of reunion, because the woman he remembers no longer exists in the same way. She's stronger now, clearer, less willing to compromise her peace. And that realization hits him. Even if she came back, it wouldn't be the same. She wouldn't accept what she once did, and that makes the loss feel final. Men fall deepest when they realize the woman outgrew the version of them that failed to rise. Not because she became cold,